I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know your licks before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You really win, but sometimes you do.
A light snow was falling. Bran could feel the flakes on his face, melting as they touched his skin like the gentlest of rains. He sat straight atop his horse, watching as the iron portcullis was winched upward. Try as he might to keep calm, his heart was fluttering in his chest. "Are you ready?" Rob asked. Bran nodded, trying not to let his fears show. He had not been outside Winterfell since his fall, but he was determined to ride out as proud as any knight. "Let's ride, then." Rob put his heels into his big grey-white gelding, and the horse walked under the portcullis. "Go." Bran whispered to his own horse. He touched her neck lightly, and the small chestnut filly started forward.
Do you ever carry a lot of things around with you? I do. For example, in my pocket, I carry a little silver star necklace that Mum bought me. It's supposed to be part of the constellation Canis Major, which means greater dog. I don't have a dog, but I do have a cat called Jupiter. I'm always carrying him around too, because he's lazy, and sometimes he won't budge from under my bed. I love Jupiter, and I know that Jupiter loves me, because he keeps bringing me gifts. Unfortunately, some of them are dead. I have a 12-year-old big sister, Terrible Topaz, who I'd carry straight into a black hole and leave her there. And then there's Mum. I carry a little photo of her in my purse. Mum has a shop near the seafront called Fudge Fudge Wink Wink, and she has a boyfriend, Galactic Gavin. By the way, it was Topaz's idea to call him Galactic.
It has been almost 10 years since I first ran for political office. I was 35 at the time, 4 years out of law school, recently married, and generally impatient with life. A seat in the Illinois legislature had opened up, and several friends suggested that I run, thinking that my work as a civil rights lawyer and contacts from my days as a community organiser would make me a viable candidate. After discussing it with my wife, I entered the race and proceeded to do what every first-time candidate does. I talked to anyone who would listen. I went to block club parties and church socials, beauty shops and barber shops. If two guys were standing on a corner, I would cross the street to hand them campaign literature. And everywhere I went, I'd get some version of the same two questions. Where'd you get that funny name? And then, you seem like a nice enough guy. Why do you want to go into something dirty and nasty like politics? I was familiar with the question, a variant on the questions asked of me years earlier when I'd first arrived in Chicago to work in low-income neighborhoods. It signaled a cynicism, not simply with politics, but with the very notion of a public life. A cynicism that, at least in the South Side neighborhoods I sought to represent, had been nourished by a generation of broken promises. In response, I would usually smile and nod and say that I understood the skepticism, but that there was and always had been another tradition in politics, a tradition that stretched from the days of the country's founding to the glory of the civil rights movement, a tradition based on the simple idea that we have a stake in one another, and that what binds us together is greater than what drives us apart, and that if enough people believe in the truth of that proposition and act on it, then we might not solve every problem, but we can get something meaningful done.
Here's a good rule to remember about rattlesnakes and scorpions. If you don't bother them, they won't bother you, usually. Being bitten by a scorpion or even a rattlesnake is not the worst thing that can happen to you. You won't die, usually. Sometimes a camper will try to be bitten by a scorpion or even a small rattlesnake. Then he will get to spend a day or two recovering in his tent instead of having to dig a hole out in the lake. But you don't want to be bitten by a yellow spotted lizard. That's the worst thing that can happen to you. You will die a slow and painful death, always. If you get bitten by a yellow spotted lizard, you might as well go out into the shade of the oak trees and lie in the hammock. There's nothing anyone can do to you anymore.
Hello world, I've decided to start a blog. This blog. Why, might you ask? You know when you shake a Coke can and then you open it and it explodes everywhere? Well, that's how I feel right now. I have so many things I want to say fizzing up inside of me, but I don't have the confidence to say them out loud. My dad once told me that I should start writing a diary. He said that keeping a diary is a great way of expressing our inmost thoughts. He also said it would be great to look back on when I was old, and that it would really make me appreciate my teenage years. It's obviously been so long since he was a teenager, he's forgotten what it's actually like. I did try though, writing a diary. I managed about 3 entries before I gave up. Most of them went something like this. Rain today, my new shoes got ruined. Jenny contemplated skipping maths. She didn't. John Barry got a nosebleed in science because he poked a pencil up there. I laughed at him. He wasn't impressed. It was awkward. Night. Not exactly Bridget Jones, right? More like can't be bothered. The thought of writing stuff to myself in a diary seems a bit pointless, really. I want to feel like someone, somewhere, will be able to read what I've got to say. That's why I've decided to give this blog a go, so that I have somewhere I can say exactly what I want, when I want, and how I want, to someone, and not have to worry that what I say won't sound cool or will make me look stupid or lose me friends. That's why this blog is anonymous, so that I can be totally me. My best friend Wiki, that's not his real name, by the way. I can't give his real name or this won't be anonymous. Would say that the fact I'm having to be anonymous in order to be myself is an epic tragedy. But what does he know? He's not a teenage girl with anxiety issues.
Blob by David Williams. Bob had a funny face. At least that's what some of the other children at his school told him. Sometimes they used more hurtful words than funny. Sometimes they called Bob Blob. Bob was born with his funny face. He lived with it for all of his 10 years. In fact, he came from a family of funny faces. His grandpa, who he lived with in an old man's tiny flat, had a funny face too. You could trace the funny faces back for generations. The boy knew his funny face made him stand out at school, and often it made him feel shy. Grandpa would tell his grandson, "Be proud of your funny face, young Bob. You come from a very long line of funny faces." But Bob didn't like it one bit. Sometimes he thought having a funny face was the worst thing in the world. The boy's favourite place was the local zoo. Grandpa would take his beloved grandson there every year as a special treat on Bob's birthday. Together they would marvel at all the animals, and Grandpa would make up funny stories about how they got to look the way they did. The elephant has a trunk so she can tap other animals on the shoulder when she's lost and needs to ask for directions.
The monster showed up just after midnight, as they do. Connor was awake when it came. He'd had a nightmare. Well, not a nightmare, the nightmare. The one he'd been having a lot lately. The one with the darkness and the wind and the screaming. The one with the hands slipping from his grasp. No matter how hard he tried to hold on, the one that always ended with, "Go away," Connor whispered into the darkness of his bedroom, trying to push the nightmare back, not let it follow him into the world of waking. Go away now.